All right.
We ready?
Yep, I'm ready.
Okay. All right, thank you. And thanks everybody for joining us. My name is Daniel Byer. I am Assistant Commissioner for Rental Assistance at New York State Homes and Community Renewal. And on behalf of the agency, I want to welcome you to this pre-bid workshop for Section 8 project-based vouchers for the fall 2022 round. For the last several years, we've been doing separate NOFAs to award our Section 8 project-based vouchers outside of the 9% RFP that many of you already participate in. This has allowed us to serve both new and existing projects in HCR's portfolio, and has opened up a number of opportunities for us, both for developers, I think, and for us as policymakers in utilizing this important tool. So really appreciate your participation. The spring 2022 round unofficially was the single largest competitive allocation of project-based vouchers in the agency's history. We gave well over 1,000 project-based vouchers. And did so for a reason, that the biggest part being that, as all of you are well aware, the real estate market has definitely changed since COVID. And we are in need of affordable housing inventory. We need places for our tenants to go and use their rental assistance so we can make sure we are maximizing our federal resources. We are not envisioning quite as big of a round for this fall, but this fall will still be bigger than usual as we again try to add to that supply side and make sure our tenants have a place to go with their voucher. So new for this year, as you're going to hear a lot about in this presentation, we are expanding the portfolios that are eligible for project-based vouchers. The idea with this NOFA was to start narrow and then gradually widen. And this year marks our first step to actually widening. Up until now, in order to apply for project-based vouchers from HCR, you had to either be seeking or already have financing from another HCR funding source. However, this year we are also expanding that to include our partners at OTDA and the HHAP portfolio. This is new for us, it's new for OTDA, and I think it's going to be new for you or most of you. We're looking forward to working through the issues with you, and I'm sure there will be a lot of questions. So please speak up either here or offline through Courtney's office with technical assistance. And as always, you have access to all of our technical assistance resources, including Lenny and Darren, who many of you know, who you probably work with already. So Courtney is coordinating with them. We want you to have a successful application, so please utilize those opportunities. Lastly, I want to thank Connie, Bruno, and Courtney, especially Courtney, who has been was tasked with building this entire NOFA, which she has done successfully. This has been an extremely busy year for them, so please be patient with them. And thank you to Courtney and to the entire team who have been getting the awards from last round under contract. So with that, I will turn it over to Courtney, and we can begin the workshop.
Thank you so much, Dan. My name is Courtney Loisel. I manage the project-based vouchers, as Dan mentioned, for HCR. Just a little housekeeping. I have everyone on mute during the course of the presentation. At the end of the presentation, I'll open up for questions. So if you have questions that you want answered, you can type them in the chat, or you can wait till the end and you'll be able to unmute yourself using the *6 or the little microphone button next to your name in the participant list. But I do ask that you hold on to questions until then. We also plan to publish a frequently asked questions based on the questions we received both before this presentation and during it, and probably will update it again after as well for any future questions that we receive. So you can check for that on the RFP website after this is published. I'm sure you heard as well that this presentation is being recorded, so that will also be published on the website after we're completed within the next couple of days. So let's get started. So the goals of our RFP for project-based Section 8. We're looking for qualified applicants to achieve the following goals. One is to increase the supply of quality housing that's affordable to low-income households in communities across New York State, and supporting our goals of deconcentrating poverty and expanding housing and economic opportunities. Our second goal is to preserve the long-term viability of existing affordable housing previously assisted with federal and state investments. So the resources available in this RFP, we expect to award up to 400 units of project-based Section 8 through this RFP. Eligible properties can be properties that require construction. So that would be either complete new construction or properties that will be rehabilitated, or you can also apply as an existing property. The contracts for project-based Section 8 are offered for 20 years as an initial contract. There is no minimum request for units, but there is a maximum that's part of our project-based voucher regulations. So there's a few things that may apply to your property. One is a property can request the hire of 25 units or 25% of the units in the property. Properties that are located in a HUD-designated low-poverty area may request project-based vouchers for up to 40% of the units within the property. And properties that are serving elderly, under our definition for project-based vouchers, that is age 62 and older, or households that are eligible for supportive services, have no unit maximum. And we'll talk about this a little bit more in detail in a little later slide. But those are our maximum requests. Income targeting for project-based vouchers is at under 50% of the area median income. So the household within the unit that is selected must be below 50% of the area median income in order to be eligible. Some of our households are also under the 30% of area median income. When we look at our Section 8 program as a whole, which includes all the Section 8 vouchers within our portfolio, all new admissions have to be 75% below the 30% of area median income. This doesn't necessarily affect any specific property. It's monitored at like an agency level to make sure that that standard is met. And then we have a number of applicable regulations to the program, so they're listed in the bottom of the table there. As I mentioned, projects can be requiring construction or existing. We divide those into two tracks. So track 1 is new construction or rehabilitation projects. So the property would be eligible for this RFP under track 1 if new construction or preservation / substantial rehabilitation is going to take place within the next 2 years. Projects are permitted to apply under this RFP if they either have been awarded or are currently applying for one of our construction or permanent financing sources through DHCR, HTSC, AHC, HFA, or as Dan mentioned, new this year, HHAP. So what that means is projects that currently or just submitted application through the unified funding that was due yesterday would be eligible to apply for under track 1. Projects that are in the pipeline for the 4% tax credit or that are going into construction using HHAP money are all going to be eligible as track 1. Projects are also eligible if they're participating in the small building participation loan program. Under track 1, a property must not have started construction or undertaken any choice limiting actions. So part of our regulations for PBV is that no construction is started at all before we enter into an agreement to enter into a housing assistance payment contract, also known as an AHAP with our many acronyms. So the AHAP is kind of a pre-contract that is required before construction for new construction or rehab projects. Track 2 are projects that are existing. That means that these are existing properties where construction or substantial rehabilitation has not taken place in the past year and will not take place within the next 2 years. In order to be eligible as an existing project, the property has to have previously received funding from DHCR, HTFC, or HFA, or newly, again this year, is HHAP. So they would have had to receive in the past 9% tax credit, 4% tax credit, HTFC financing, home financing through HTFC, HFA bond financing, FLIC, or other competitively awarded HFA or HTFC loan subsidies. Also eligible is state supervised public housing and state supervised Mitchell-Lama housing. To be considered an existing property, the property has to be existing housing. It must have a current regulatory agreement through one of the programs that I mentioned, and it must be compliant with housing quality standards and other applicable requirements at the time of selection for award. If you have a property that has a current project-based voucher contract with HCR and you want to add units to that contract, you may also apply as a Track 2 project as long as you're not exceeding the maximum number of vouchers that can exist at your property. So here's our timeline. The RFP was issued on November 17th. We're doing the application workshop today, December 7th. Technical assistance will be available through December 21st and may be requested until December 16th. So I want to emphasize that if you're interested in technical assistance, please make the request by December 16th so I can get you scheduled. Individual questions will continue to be answered via email after December 21st until the due date of the RFP, which is January 10th. Applications must be submitted by 5 p.m. Eastern Time on January 10th. Please also consider the time that it can take for the large emails to go through, or the fact that some large emails get bounced back. We want to make sure we receive your application on time. We are anticipating a date of awards on or around March 15th of 2023. So to be eligible under this RFP, we expect one project or property per proposal. So that's one project or property must submit one application. Properties must have currently be applying for or have previously received funding from DHCR, HTFC, HFA, or under HHAP, state supervised public housing, state supervised Mitchell-Lama, or all the things listed there. Eligible properties can be single buildings, multiple contiguous buildings, multiple buildings on contiguous parcels of land, or scattered site projects. Manufactured home projects may apply if the project includes set structures and doesn't include a pad rent. Existing housing has to be compliant with our housing quality standards, which is a inspection standard specific to Section 8. So we expect that the unit would be able to pass inspection at the time of award. I wanted to talk a little bit more in detail about HHAP eligibility, since this is our first year offering the project-based vouchers to HHAP projects. So either new construction or existing projects can apply as HHAP funded. units must be located in non-licensed permanent supportive housing. Units located in transitional housing, overnight shelters, hospitals, prisons, institutional settings, and nursing homes are not eligible for project-based vouchers. We will consider housing with shared kitchen or living spaces, but they have to be compliant with our project-based voucher regulations. So if you're expecting to apply under with shared housing, I really recommend a technical assistance so we can go through that more in depth. To be eligible, each household must have an assigned individual unit within the property with a lease of no less than 12 months. So we expect one-year leases and individual units for each household, or individual living space for each household. Units that are granted project-based vouchers may not receive any other forms of rental assistance paid to the owner, including but not limited to rent payments or operational assistance. However, funding that's specifically allocated to help cover the supportive service costs for the property, including ESHI funding, is allowable. Properties that have HHAP funding must still otherwise meet all the other federal requirements for Section 8 project-based vouchers. And then we reference our regulations there. All right, so I said I'd talk a little bit more about unit maximum. This is an area that gets a lot of questions. So general properties can request the hire of 25 units or 25% of units at the property. So that means if your property is small, let's say you have 15 units, you can request up to 15 units because it's under the hire of 25 units or 25%. If you are a larger property serving a general population, like let's say 200 units, you would be able to apply for up to 50 units for units that are not serving elderly or people receiving supportive services. Properties located in a low poverty area can request project-based vouchers for up to 40% of the units. So within the RFP, you'll see that there's a link to the HUD map that indicates low poverty areas. In order to be eligible for that 40%, your property must be shown within that map as being a low poverty area. There are some spaces in the state that don't have enough data. If it does say there's not enough data, you're not eligible for up to 40%. Properties serving elderly households aged 62 and older, or households eligible for supportive service have no unit maximum. So that means you can request up to 100% of units within a project if you serve elderly people or provide supportive services. Just to note that any supportive services provided are paid for outside of the project-based voucher funding. So you have to have a source of funding for those supportive services. As I mentioned, there's no unit minimum for this RFP. Any eligible units cannot have an existing rental subsidy. And when we're talking about a unit count, it includes all the project-based voucher contracts that you have at your property. So sometimes properties will receive, when they were put into service, project-based voucher contracts for 8 units. That would be subtracted from your unit maximum if you're requesting more vouchers through this RFP. So you want to be really mindful about all the kind of subsidies that you have of the project and add and make sure that if it's project-based Section 8, that you are counting it toward your unit maximum. We have some project-based voucher priorities. One of them is properties providing supportive services, supportive housing, to persons with disabilities or elderly persons. To be prioritized in this category, the services must apply to the project-based voucher units. So properties where you have maybe a certain number of set-aside units that have services, but they don't apply to the project-based voucher units are not eligible under this. And any applicants under this category must provide a service plan as part of their tab 6. Oops. Someone just unmuted themselves. Hold on a second.
The letters, because you didn't even remember what.
Okay. All right. The second priority for project-based vouchers is properties serving veterans. That does mean that the units are specifically set aside for veterans. So units would be housing only veterans to be prioritized in this category. Properties serving homeless households are also a priority. And again, these units would have to specifically be serving homeless households. Units that are state-aided public housing, defined as projects funded by New York's Public Housing Law of 1939, that are currently under regulation by DHCR, are not federalized or in the process of being federalized, and do not have another source of rental assistance for the units where the project-based vouchers are requested, are also a priority for us in this RFP. And then finally, properties that are located in a low poverty census tract, again, as indicated in that HUD map that I discussed a little earlier, are also a priority. Any application will have 6 tabs. Tab 1 is a cover letter. Tab 2 is applicant information. That's a pre-existing form that exists as an appendix at the end of the RFP. Tab 3 is an application narrative. So there's a list of questions that we'll ask you to fill out. Tab 4 is an operating assessment. For existing properties, we have the Tab 4 document as an Excel spreadsheet that's listed on the RFP webpage. For Track 1 applicants, the Tab 4 is going to be your other source of HCR funding underwriting book. So just pay careful attention to the differences between Track 2 and Track 1 as you're looking at the application materials. Tab 5 is a vendor responsibility questionnaire. There's a link within the RFP to get to the questionnaire. So you want to look into that, make sure you fill that out and attach that as Tab 5. And then Tab 6 is supporting attachments. Again, you want to read carefully and make sure that you are responding to the correct information, depending on if you're Track 1, new construction or rehab, or Track 2, existing properties. Just to reiterate again about Tab 4, there's the maximum rent for a project-based voucher cannot exceed 110% of the fair market rent. And for existing properties, the Tab 4 has a separate line that will be where you calculate your project-based voucher income based on the number of vouchers that you're requesting. So you can find the fair market rents at this link, which is also exists in the RFP, and calculate it at 110%, which is the maximum. You'll want to just make sure, especially as an existing property, that you're looking carefully and being attentive to detail in the Tab 4. We do set standards out for the debt coverage ratio and cash coverage. You will want to be careful and look at that, and any variance that you have from the standard, or if you make any changes to the workbook, please make sure you use the notes column, which is column Y, to explain why you made that change. So applicants for PBV, once selected, are responsible for being aware of laws and regulations regarding project-based vouchers. Properties will be subject to environmental review and subsidy land review requirements. Davis-Bacon for new construction or rehab is triggered at 9 project-based voucher units. And we do ask that properties should be familiar with federal and state requirements as listed in the RFP. We will expect that existing properties that are selected will complete the required environmental review within 60 days of their award. Existing properties will also be required to submit an architect certification post-award, but prior to contract. So both the environmental review and the architect certification will be required before we can enter into a contract for the project-based vouchers because of our existing regulations under the program. Just another reminder, if you want technical assistance, please request it by December 16th. I have a link here to the RFP documents and my contact information. The submission email for the RFP is rentalrfp@hcr.ny.gov. And you can also submit any questions at a later time to both my email and the rental RFP email. That does conclude what I have prepared to present, so I'll open it up for questions. I have some existing questions that I received prior to the call, so I'm going to go over those first, and then I'll go through the Q&A. If you have questions after that, you can unmute yourself by pressing *6, or you can also still type them in the chat. So I'm going to start with the questions I have prior to, and then we'll go forward. All right, so one question was regarding HHAP contracts that have scattered sites. This person has one contract that has 9 locations, 6 locations, 5 locations. Can they apply for units within these sites that need the assistance only, or do all of the locations within the project need to qualify? So to be eligible for the project-based voucher, the households have to have an assigned individual unit with a lease of no less than 12 months. The project-based vouchers do not float. So when you put your application in as part of the tab 4, you will see that we are going to request the specific units that you're requesting the project-based voucher. Once you go into contract, you will have a list of units that have the vouchers that doesn't generally move between units except in specific circumstances. So you'll have to identify those specific units.
Courtney, can I ask the question?
Yes, is there a question?
Yeah, well, it's my question that I asked, so I'm just going to ask you.
Okay,
just to
sure,
verify
go for
something
it.
for me. When I say 9, one contract in 9 locations, because with the HAHAP program, originally the finance part of it, they were allowed to purchase houses. So we're talking about single house units now. So my question is, if it's a single house unit that was purchased with HAP financing, I don't need, for let's say for one of those locations, one of those contracts for HAP is 9 different units. 3 of them, let's say, already have Section 8. So I would be applying only for the ones that qualify out of the remaining 6. And would they be under that one contract I submit, or would I be submitting individual ones for each of the houses?
So if they were under a single HHAP contract, you would do one application for, and then identify those 6 units as the 6 that you're requesting the PBV for.
Okay, so I would not include the ones that already have some type of form of payment, whether it's Department of Social Services, whether it's emergency housing, it would just be the ones that qualify for this particular program.
Correct.
Okay. All right. That was one of my questions.
Okay. And I think I might have answered your second question, but I'm going to say it again. So the second question was, do I have to apply for each scattered project separately, and how many applications can I submit? So you can submit one application for each project, which could include scattered sites. Under this RFP, our definition of project can be a single building, multiple contiguous buildings, or multiple buildings on contiguous parcels of land, or scattered sites that have been accepted as a single project for the purpose of an application for HCR funding. So a scattered site, if it was considered within a single project during your application, it would count as one project.
Okay, so
and you would do one application per project.
Okay, so it'd be 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and then I do have home financing, which is a further question I asked down there, for scattered houses. Again, they were done separately though, so those would be considered one single building, and an application would have to be entered for each and every one of them.
Correct. That's right.
What was the source of the home funds? This is Lenny Scrum.
Hi, how are you? Well, I just know that we had home financing originally when we purchased these properties, and that those contracts have ended. But I did read in all this literature that said even though the financing has ended, that those units would still qualify for this particular program. Is
Was
that
the home,
accurate?
yeah, no, the question I'm asking is, this is Lenny Skrell from HCR. Is the source of the home funds from the Housing Trust Fund Corporation, or is it from a locality?
I think it's from the original, the locality it might be. No, actually, no, from the trusting fund. I think it is from the trusting fund. Thank you.
So you want to be sure, you'll want to check that out, because if it is from a locality, it wouldn't be eligible.
Okay.
So if it's from HTSC, then it is eligible. And you would also want to make sure you still have a regulatory agreement that's in effect.
Oh, okay. So if it's in effect, then we could apply, but if it's not in effect, then it's no longer applicable.
That's right.
Okay, perfect.
All right. Another question is, will tenants that receive project-based voucher be helped paying with the difference in their security deposit? So at this time, HCR does offer a landlord incentive to assist tenants with security deposits. So they would be eligible for security deposit assistance if they receive the project-based voucher.
Okay. Because most of our HAP tenants only pay 30% of their income, and their security was at 30% of that income. So there was that difference. So I'm glad that that's answered as well. Thank you.
Great. And will tenants receive new leases with the new PBV higher rents? The answer is yes. So once someone is found eligible, they do have to sign a new lease. And there's also a required program addendum that is attached to a lease under the program that goes through the rules. So they do have to go into a new lease. The lease document is the responsibility of the owner. So the owner uses the lease that they want to. And then the HUD tenancy addendum is a required HUD document. The maximum allowable rents are 110% of the fair market rent. Correct. Or the reasonable market rent for the area. So once we receive a contract rent request, we look at the like similar units within the area and make sure that the requested rent doesn't exceed the market rent.
Okay. And are you deducting the utilities like you would in other Section 8 programs?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So the fair market rent, the 110% of the fair market rent would be the rent plus estimated cost of utilities. Anyone who's submitting an application who would like a copy of the county utility allowance that we use can just email me and I'll send it to you. Let's see. All right, I think we covered your home question.
Yep.
Another question, there's a house that's rented out to 5 tenants that's on the HOPWA program. Would they qualify? So any project that has an existing rental subsidy would not be eligible. So I thought in this case, it sounds like they probably do have an existing subsidy, but you can correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, that subsidy it goes according to their income, similar to the HAP program, but I don't think the HOP was one of I have to find out what the financing and all the back work for that particular program was, but that particular program is 30% of the income. So I was curious to see if that would be considered single occupancy.
Is the project also receiving additional money from HOPWA besides the tenant rent?
I don't believe they are, but that's something I have to verify with financing.
Okay, so the other question
I did ask. They said there's no funding. Actually, I did ask.
Okay, so the second question I would have is to make sure that they meet the requirements of individual living space, 12-month lease, and all the other requirements that we outline in the RFP to make sure that they're eligible or the project is eligible.
Courtney, can I just add something?
Sure.
Make sure that the HOPWA subsidies are either tenant-based or project-based.
Okay.
This may be a situation where you have you know, a COC has an agreement to provide tenant-based rent subsidies to individuals who are HOPWA eligible and uh, over project-based rent subsidies. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Great. And the last question I had is, well, from this list, is there any startup budget for this project? And the answer is no. There's no upfront budget for the project. The income comes in with the increase in rental subsidy once people are under contract and under lease for the project.
Thank you very much, Courtney.
Sure, my pleasure. All right, I'm going to start going through the chat. So one question is, are projects that are currently under construction under CDBG CARES funding eligible to apply for project-based vouchers? Kelly, do you want to tell me who issues CDBG CARES, or maybe Lenny? I don't know if you're familiar with CDBG CARES.
I'm familiar with it. Is again, CDBG CARES is a grant from the federal government. Is this directly to the state grant that funded this, or is it a locality grant?
It is through HCR, Charles Fillion.
So your award is between the Housing Trust Fund Corporation and the owner of the property.
We are the owner of the property, correct?
It seems to be me. And so you're under construction right now?
Correct. So the grant was awarded. It's actually through Shenango County. The grant was awarded. We're the subrecipient. It's our property that's owned by Greater Opportunities. It's under construction, scheduled to be. It is an existing low-income tax credit project under HCR.
I think I remember this. This is so the question that plays out, and I don't think the RFPs deals this, but one of the things that Courtney raised earlier is that you're under construction, right? So the question, and you may have to check with Charlie, but is if that during the process of allocating the CDBG CARES that you completed NEPA.
Oh, yeah, all the environmental review, I believe we did, correct? Yeah. Because it's an HCR, so we would do, it's this, I'm assuming the same environmental review, but we had to do a large portion of environmental reviews in order to get the funding under CDBG CARES. It's an HCR project.
Yeah. Can I make a recommendation? Maybe it would be worthwhile on this project to have a conversation with Courtney and myself offline, because I think there's some nuances. I don't know if you think that's a reasonable approach, Courtney.
Yeah, I think that's good, because I think you wouldn't be eligible under track 1, but maybe in the future you could be under track 2. So we can talk about it offline.
Yeah.
Okay,
Where
perfect.
is this project? Where is this project?
It's in
I'm just curious.
New Berlin, New York.
Yeah. This is an OHP workout. This is a project that the President Kelly's group has been asked to take over for a defunct rural preservation company in New Berlin, and
correct.
And this scenario was something that was pursued to keep these units in the affordable housing inventory in New Berlin, right, Kelly?
Correct. Absolutely correct.
I think I've been to the property. I know which one you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. It's a view. All right. So all right. So Courtney, I also sent you an email, Courtney, so maybe we could just set something up after. Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly.
Okay. You're welcome.
All right. So the next question is, what do you consider substantial rehab? I don't know, is Heather Spitzberg on the phone? I don't think I saw her on my list. So Amanda, this question has a lot of nuance. If you have specific things that you are doing in the property, can you send me an email and I can check in with our environmental unit and answer your question specifically? Because substantial rehab is going to be, it's kind of like there's a list of things that they look at. And it is essentially like something more than upkeep of the property, but it is very specific. So please send me an email with your specifics and I'll check in on that. All right, the next question. All right, thank you. We currently have 76 units of permanent supportive housing with a current and new HHAP application. We also have 30 slots that are Section 8 mod rehab. Are you still eligible to apply for PBV under some units? All right. Thanks for asking this question, Bonnie. I'm going to double check if mod rehab is going to count toward your unit count. And I can post it on our frequently asked questions, or if you shoot me an email, I'll email you back also. Because I want to double check on that.
Thank you.
Just writing this one down. Okay. And Bonnie, another clarifier. When you say 76 units of permanent supportive housing, do you have a rental subsidy on that?
We only 30 Section 8 mod rehab units. And I say units,
okay,
but
so,
they're really like slots because they go by the person, not specific unit.
Okay, so it's 76 total, but 30 of those have the mod rehab?
Correct. So 46 we do not.
Okay.
So this is the old Section 8 mod rehab, right? Or it's not SRO sex. This is like the program that was around 25, 30 years ago.
I say yes because I've been here 18 years and it was here before I came here. I mean, we had a contract with it back then.
Okay. Yeah, no, I haven't heard Section 8 mod rehab talked about it in a long time. So it's
not a guy now.
Yeah, let me double check on that, and I'll get back to you. All right. The next question, is this eligible for any community in New York State, including municipalities like Mount Vernon, Yonkers, and Peekskill, which have their own allocations? Yes. So we have, we are a statewide housing authority, so I know in the past, some communities have not had our mobile Section 8, but when we started this RFP, we did open the opportunity to all communities. So there's no communities off the list under the project-based voucher request. So you can apply. All right.
But to clarify, our vouchers will go through our local administrator, which may or may not be the local PHA you're used to working with.
Thanks, Dan.
Can I have a quick follow-up to that question?
Sure.
So we do have one building in Peekskill that that just got its permanent financing about a year ago. It was fully rented out, built, and received permanent financing about a year ago. We didn't have any additional subsidies at that time. It's just a regular, HCR building. But we do have some tenants that are having a difficult time post-COVID keeping up with their rents. It's a fully affordable senior building. And so we wanted to know, if we did apply for project-based vouchers, would we be able to allocate those vouchers to people who currently live in the building, or would we be required to go to the to the local authority off the list and sort of have to wait till people moved out and get new people off the list?
So there's two questions here. The first one is, I think you actually will want to wait to apply until you're 2 years out from your initial occupancy, because that's part of our standard for the track 1 versus track 2, is that you have been in existence, you haven't done any construction for at least 2 years. So I think that's something you want to take a look at. But the second part is that for existing properties, which is track 2, we do screen existing tenants. So you would be, if you got granted the vouchers, we do lease up people who live there. In the future, if you have vacancies, they are filled from a waiting list that's held by HCR through our local administrator. So they would be, you'd receive referrals from the site-specific waiting list that's created for your property.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Sure. All right. So will residents living in the project already have to relinquish their tenant-based vouchers if we are awarded the PBV? So the answer is they have an option of retaining their Section 8 voucher or accepting the project-based voucher. Our goal is not in any way to displace anyone who's currently living in the property. So they have the option of accepting the PBV or not. If they choose to keep their Section 8 voucher, then they could remain in the property, and your contract would be minus that one person, one unit that denied the project-based voucher. All right, I have a question. Does Tier 1 compete against Tier 2? Kathy, I don't know if I completely understand the question. Can you provide a little bit of clarification? You just have to press *6 to unmute yourself. All right. I'm going to keep moving, but Kathy, if you can provide clarification in the chat or press *6 and explain, I'm happy to answer. All right. The next question is, can you explain the track difference for existing projects with HHAP and certain work that will be done in the building over the next 2 years, but not in the units themselves? So I'm guessing this is work around the property or perhaps on the outside of the building. I think, again, Bonnie, this is a very specific set of work that can be considered maintenance versus rehab. So if you wanted to send me an email with the specifics that you're thinking of, I can check in on that for you.
I will do that. Thank you.
Sure. All right. So the next question. Does an HHAP application need to be submitted for a project in order to apply for this funding? We have plans to reapply for HHAP, but will not have resubmitted before this application is due. That is a good question. So we would expect that your application is at least in the process in order to be considered. However, I don't know right off the top of my head when the applications are accepted. I think I saw Brenda on the phone. I don't know if Brenda knows the answer. But otherwise, I can get back to you.
Courtney, it's a rolling RFP, so they can apply at any time.
Okay. So the answer is that we would be checking to make sure that the application is submitted and under consideration to be considered for the project-based voucher. Thank you, Brenda.
And any award would be contingent on you getting an award from HHAP.
Correct. Thank you, Dan. All right. So project-based vouchers must be specific units, not for the resident that might qualify. So project-based vouchers are connected to specific units, which is kind of what makes them unique from the other types of Section 8. So the unit becomes eligible if they're if we're filling it with an eligible person for new construction, or if it's occupied by an eligible person and that it passed inspection. So what that means is in the future, if you had an existing unit that was filled with an eligible person and that person left, then the next applicant would be selected from the waiting list. So they don't move from the building. I hope that answers your question, Bonnie. If not, let me know.
Okay.
Okay. The next question, under the operating assessment tab, does the equity contribution schedule need to include all pre-development funding? That actually sounds like a new construction question. So if your project is new construction, also going through the unified funding or the 4% pipeline, you'll be using their underwriting book. So it'll be based on what the standards of that tax credit underwriting is. I hope that answers your question. But if not, please unmute yourself and ask a follow-up.
Just one thing, if you're combining project-based rent subsidies with a tax credit allocation, either 9% or 4%, you need to make sure that your underwriting model internalized subsidy layering. Sorry.
Thank you. No, that's helpful, Lenny. Thank you. Okay. All right. The last question I have in the chat. Danielle, can you ask this question again? I'm a little bit unclear. It's
Hi.
Yeah.
So I get my funding from a Section 8 office that has they fund my project, and they have housing choice vouchers. And they actually no one can move to this project unless they qualify for it's like a housing choice voucher agency. So I'm not even sure if I don't think I'm in a position to even go through this. I'm not sure. I'm just on the call because I was told to be on the call, and I might not need to be, but I'm just making sure, like, if I have a community in which they can't move here unless they qualify for the housing agency through their standards, then they would be the one applying for the assistance, not myself, right?
It sounds like you already have some type of project-based assistance in that case. So you probably wouldn't be eligible for more. The project wouldn't be eligible for more unless they weren't meeting the maximum number of vouchers. So it sounds like you want to take a look at your, how many units in the building have a voucher already and are receiving subsidy.
The only ones that don't receive subsidy are the ones that are over income. They're the only ones that don't receive subsidy. And if someone moved out of that unit that's over income, in order to fill that unit, the person would have to be eligible for the subsidy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you know if you have tenant-based rent subsidies or project-based rent subsidies for your project?
Project-based, but it's not within, like I said, it's from an outside agency, but it is through DHCR with the other agency.
Okay.
Yeah,
I don't know. Maybe I'm not getting it. Okay. What community are you in?
Main Street Houses in South Fallsburg, New York.
In Sullivan County, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
I think you have a contract with us already.
Yes.
It sounds familiar.
It's through another, because I get I have MORs with you and everything. So, but the funding doesn't come straight to me. The funding comes through another agency. That's
Okay.
Yeah, we utilize local administrators, so you might be thinking
exactly
of.
It.
I think, is it Rupco the administrator?
I'm sorry?
I'm trying to remember. Is Rupco the Section 8 administrator in Sullivan County?
No. Pathstone is.
Pathstone? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So you have a contract with us already. So unless you're below the maximum, you wouldn't be able to apply for more.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Sure. All right. And then another question is demolition or asbestos remediation of the existing structure considered construction. Jonathan, I'm going to look into that again with the environmental review and just check on that. If you want to send me an email exactly what work is going on, I can double check.
My educated courtenay is yes.
Yeah.
But again, are you dealing with the choice activity that you want to occur before? The issue is if you don't complete NEPA before you make choice limiting activities like demolition or asbestos removal, there's a risk that you won't be able to consummate your your Section 8 contract. So you need to make sure that you complete NEPA before you take those actions. Again, I'll defer to Courtney's research, but I'm pretty confident what you're describing are choice limiting actions.
Yeah, I would think so too, but we can double check. All right, so next question, if an ESHI project with special population would have to fill vacancies off the HCR waiting list? So the answer is yes. How that works is, you know, if projects are providing services, they may have a special referral source. So like, for instance, some projects that we have are serving homeless households and they receive referrals from the COC waiting list. What happens is the applicants get referred to the waiting list and then are selected and screened for eligibility. So, you know, there can be, everyone is pulled through the waiting list, but you can have a referral source for applicants.
If I can just elaborate something on ESHI, you can have ESHI and Section 8 in the same projects. You can't have them in the same units, with the exception of certain circumstances in the city of New York.
So I asked this question because we're in New York City, Fortune Society, and
hi, Joanne.
Hi, Lenny. And it's a senior building and the target population is homeless seniors with incarceration history.
Yeah.
So I think you're saying we would need to refer them to the waiting list. But we surely wouldn't be able to take random people off the waiting list because they wouldn't fit the eligibility.
Correct. So what happens is you kind of like outline a specific population in your contract, and then we indicate a referral source, and so then those referrals go through the waiting list, but they're made from the source, right?
Actually, there are multiple referral sources.
Which is fine, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
it works the same way.
This will probably play out for Section 8 as well as a funded project. Is that inevitably we're going to design a marketing plan that will give you greater specificity in terms of how you market, given the complexity of the populations in your referral system, Joanne.
Great, thank you.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Sure, no problem. All right, thanks everybody for so many questions. I have a few more. When in the process does the environmental review get performed? So as part of our application, we do kind of a pre-check of the environmental review. Once a project is awarded, they're required to complete a phase 1 environmental, and I'm only talking about existing projects. For new construction, I think maybe Lenny can at least give a little bit of an overview of environmental review when you do that.
Well, on a situation where you receive PBVs from that filter?
Yeah, if it was a new construction.
Yeah, what we would do is that you would, so you would get, let's say you applied for 9% credit, or we've invited you to enter into pipeline for an HFA deal. Our environmental unit will send out a follow-up letter to you that lays out everything that you have to do before, again, to get through NEPA. Either, you know, if we have federal sources in the financing, or you have Section 8 PBVs, that will take place prior to you closing and commencing construction. And, you know, before, you know, Courtney is going to need evidence that NEPA has been completed before she can finalize the HAP contract for your particular project. But that would take place sometime between an award letter from the 9% side and a formal acceptance into pipeline on a 4% implementation. Does that answer your question?
I think so.
Yeah, and we will, and our environmental unit will send you a follow-up letter that details explicitly what we need from you. And our environmental staffers are excellent in trying to help sponsors get through NEPA. So, okay.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you, Lenny. Another question, does a NISHIP project meet the supportive services requirement? I would say, I think yes. Our supportive services requirement for the Section 8 is located in our admin plan. If you send me an email, I'll send you the exact location of that description, but I believe it should meet the requirements. I have a question from Mary Beth. How to use project-based vouchers in a property that's in default? Mary Beth, did you want to provide more information?
I did. So just tell me if it's too much. I'm a consultant and I'm working with a nonprofit that's in New York City. The project was funded by HCR over 30 years ago, but the project is currently in default with inadequate cash flow to pay the debt service, and the sponsor is throwing in up to 6 figures annually to keep the project afloat. As the existing loan funded by HCR has matured, HCR has asked us to do 2 things: an IP&A, which identified over $2 million in work that's needed, and it's only 20 units, and additionally to secure project-based vouchers. The rents are very, very low. They're rent controlled, and that really is where the problem first came up, is as a result. But when I look at this RFP, which of course would be representative of other RFPs in this series, there doesn't seem to be a reasonable pathway. In addition, I seem to be coming up across 2 problems that pertain outside of the fact as to whether or not it's a priority out of the 6 priorities you laid out, of what, and I don't think it's any of the 6. I have to check on the low poverty, but other than that, I don't think so, is the idea of trying to secure additional funding from HCR and trying to get the Section 8, and we could either run afoul of choice limiting or Davis-Bacon, and we'd like to get about 16 out of the 20 units with project-based. And so it just seems to me we're kind of at a standstill here.
Mary Beth, this is Lenny. I mean, basically, you engaged the F&D unit after being referred to by OHP's 9% staff. This is Ludlow, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think your strategy question is, do you go number 1 or number 2? Because it's an existing occupied affordable housing project that's presently regulated. If you go 2, you're going to be limited when you can start work for 2 years, but it would help the cash flow of the organization. Now, the other strategy question is you're applying for, if you're applying for 1 is an incentive structure to access either 9% or 4% resources, and you should hold off applying until you apply and then apply for project-based rent subsidies. And the rhythm of these project-based rent subsidies, and please correct me if I'm misstating anything, Courtney, is tied to the 9% RFP. And given the size of the project, so whenever we come up with the strategy, at least internally, is that we'll promulgate a Section 8 PBV RFP shortly after the 9% implementation begins. Okay? Does that help you at all?
Yes.
But I think that essentially your client was recruited to work with the agency to come up with a workout, coming up with a reasonable operating scenario that will allow the project to thrive. It's part of that strategy. But again, you need to sort of think through, what I think you probably are is a number 1 candidate, but you're not ready to apply yet.
No, and in addition, I don't want to just be able to apply for 8 units.
Well, do you have to apply for, the issue of 8 units or more is Davis-Bacon related.
Correct.
If you want to avoid Davis-Bacon, then you need to apply for 8 or less units. If you're willing to put up with Davis-Bacon, then you can ask for more units. But that's a strategy question for you that you understand.
Yeah, I do. The one question I don't think I have an answer to is, David, how long, say for example, if we did the construction first, how long does the Davis-Bacon situation apply? So if we applied 2 years before we did the construction, or 2 years after, or what's the timeline? I guess I don't know the answer to that particular question. Do you?
If you want to apply for more than, I apologize if I'm talking too much, Courtney. If you're applying for more than 8 units of PBVs, because that is going to be good for your project, then, and you're going to use it as a part of your operating scenario and a financing plan to improve your property,
Right.
you should assume Davis-Bacon.
Yeah.
It's a strategic choice.
Yep.
Can you get by with 8 and avoid Davis-Bacon, or does not having 16 units of PBV a deal killer, and it's worth dealing with the Davis-Bacon consequences?
Right.
Okay. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
No problem.
No
Thanks.
problem, Mary Beth.
Thanks.
Yep. All right, and I think this is the last one. Thanks for everybody for bearing with us being a little over time. If we've completed the phase 1 for the 9% round, does that fulfill NEPA? So if you're also applying in the 9% round, that environmental review is going to be baked into your process, like Lenny just talked about a second ago. So you will get that clearance as part of that process.
Yeah. And again, going back to the messaging is this phase 1 environmental site assessment, the site suitability narrative will provide context for the environmental unit designing you a follow-up letter that will facilitate how you get through seeker and how you get through NEPA, depending on the, okay.
All right, so thanks everybody for joining us today. I will expect a few follow-up emails, and again, we'll remind you to please request TA before the 16th. Thank you again, and I hope, I wish everyone happy applying. We will talk to you soon.
Okay.
Thank you.